Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Jules Massenet's Don Quichotte, which I saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. The conductor was Emanuel Villaume, the production was done by Jakob Alborn, the sets were done by Katrin Bombe, the costumes were done by Katrin Wulfermann, the lights were handled by Ulrich Niepel, the assistant director was Silke Zenze, the chorus master was Jeremy Bynes, and the dramaturgy was handled by Dorothea Hartmann and Katarina Duda. I mainly knew this opera for three things. First of all, this opera was based on the Spanish classic written by Miguel de Cervantes called, of course, Don Quixote. Secondly, this opera, back when it was premiered in 1910, starred Fyodor Shaliapin, one of the most well-known Russian bassists of the olden times. And thirdly, this opera was premiered 2 years before Jules Massenet's passing. So the basic premise of Don Quixote goes like this, especially if you have read the novel. It all starts out with Don Quixote admiring and even falling in love with the country girl Dulcinea, and he swears upon his life that he will return her necklace, which was stolen by bandits. Along the way, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza fight against the windmills and even some robbers, and therefore retrieve the pearl necklace. Once he gives back the necklace to Dulcinea and asks for her hand in marriage, she simply laughs off his request. That is, until he and Dulcinea are both left alone does she apologize to him for her rash actions. And once her friends come back to taunt and mock Don Quixote, who is slowly dying of a broken heart, Sancho Panza then defends Don Quixote and calls them off on their crap. The opera doesn't end so happily, as Don Quixote then passes away while hearing the voice of Dulcinea, while Sancho Panza weeps over his now lifeless body. So basically, this opera is a combination of a lot of comedic elements, especially found in the first few acts of the opera, and also some tragic elements, especially the ones that happen in the later parts. And even with Dulcinea begging for Don Quixote's forgiveness and his eventual death in the final moments of the opera. With that said, let's get on to what I thought about the production and costumes. Overall, I thought that the production was really frigid, and it didn't have that Spanish fire that I was so accustomed to in traditional productions of Don Quixote. But what it had going for it was some surreal elements, as well as some Monty Python-esque statues and masks and many other props to make this opera a little bit more on the surreal side, as well as keep its hilarious origins intact. What I didn't like about this production was the overall frigidness, especially in Dulcinea's Tavern. In my mind, I would have loved to have Dulcinea's Tavern to be full of warm and dusky colors. Here, I thought that the colors were really cold and stale and kind of lifeless. This is probably to show that there is a juxtaposition in the normal, boring world of Dulcinea and the more exciting adventures that Don Quixote gets himself into, and even in the final moments when we see some body parts being worn by Dulcinea's friends, and even a huge head and some huge hands and huge limbs coming into play. Not to mention the moment where the bandits give Don Quixote the huge pearl necklace, which then shrinks down conveniently to Dulcinea, was quite fascinating. In fact, this was another element that this particular production plays upon, and that's magic. Some instances include that very moment when Dulcinea's normal working girl dress gets transformed into a red gown, and even when some background characters are trying to turn the rose from being straight to being bent and even make it disappear. And even when the bandits perform a magic trick on Don Quixote, only to have him being switched to another bandit, and Don Quixote appears unscathed, and many other things that happened. And another thing worth mentioning about Sancho Panza is that he comes in wearing this horse's head, and he continues to have his horse's tail, probably to show that he is not just Don Quixote's faithful servant and friend, but also someone who is akin to his steed, even though Sancho Panza also has his mule as his main source of transportation. So overall, not really a fan of the production, but it still had some interesting moments going for it. And now we get to the singers, starting off with Alex Esposito as Don Quixote. Now, this role is just as coveted as Filippo II from Don Carlo, Don Giovanni, Sarastro, Boris Godunov, Dosife and Ivan Kovansky, Sparafucile from Rigoletto, Colline from La Bohème, Don Basilio from Barbiere di Siviglia, and even Marcel from Les Huguenots. What one needs in Don Quixote is either a basso cantante or a basso profondo to sing this really iconic character. In fact, this role is a major calling card for many a bass. We had the likes of not only Fyodor Shaliapin, who created the part, but also Boris Christoph, Italo Tayo, Samuel Ramey, José Vendôme, Nikolai Gyaurov, Ruggero Raimondi, and even Ferruccio Furlanetto, who have performed this iconic old knight. And I thought that Alex Esposito was decent in this part, even though I would have loved to have a true basso singing the role. That is not to discredit Alex Esposito's talents as a singing actor. He brought in vivaciousness into this part, and he brought in so much masculinity that he made Don Quixote an effective character. And I do like some of his singing. There were times that he was able to sing with such passion and flair, and he was able to sing with such nobility. However, there is one thing that I am missing from his overall vocal performance, and that is there are so many bassos who have actually sung this role a lot better than him, and those of them are basically from the past. My personal favorite Don Quixotes are those of Italo Tayo, Boris Christoph, and Nikolai Gyaurov, just to name a few. In fact, there are many other bassos of today who could have performed this role and be just as wonderful. We could have had Carlo Colombara, René Pape, Julian Konstantinov, Riccardo Zanellato, and even what we have today with Mika Kares, just to name a few. I'm pretty sure that these bassos would have done an amazing job singing Don Quixote. However, when all is said and done, Alex Esposito did a fine job. Did he do an exceptional job? Not really. I felt like his voice could have benefited in terms of being much richer and rounder to perform this part. But I still have to give him credit of what he had to pull off tonight. He was able to give Don Quixote a lot of humor, he was able to make him spry and vivacious, and he was able to make him quite virile as a character. Singing his sidekick, Sancho Panza, was Seth Carrico. Now, as opposed to Don Quixote's basso cantante / basso profondo voice, Sancho Panza needs a bass baritone or even that of a high bass to sing this iconic sidekick. Many a Sancho Panza also went out of their way to sing the four villains from Tales of Hoffmann, Wotan from the Ring Tetralogy, Klingsor from Parsifal, and many other great roles for either a high bass or a bass baritone. There have also been some dramatic baritones who sung this role, especially Alain Fondary and Gabriel Bacouet, just to name a few. But if you ask me, I always prefer it when a bass baritone or a high bass or basso buffo perform this part. A couple of notable basso Sancho Panzas included the likes of Carlo Badioli and Valeriano Lanchas, just to name a few. And with Seth Carrico, I thought that he managed to use his tall, striking, and elegant stage presence to bring this wonderfully iconic and fun sidekick character to life. He was able to find a lot of charm with this particular sidekick, and for that, I still have to salute him. However, there were times that his voice didn't sound like a true bass baritone. It sounded more like a high baritone, especially when he hits some of the low notes, and especially when he tries to make his voice ring. And speaking of that, there were times that he was drowned out by the orchestra, even though he built himself up well for the finale. Regardless, I still have to give Seth Carrico some credit to what he had to pull off as Sancho Panza. He was able to be humorous in a subtle way, and he was able to sing without any form of wobbles whatsoever. Then we go to the apple of Don Quixote's eye, Dulcinea, sung by Clementine Margen. Now, Dulcinea really does call for either a dramatic mezzo-soprano or even that of a contralto. I would say that this part needs the sultriness and sexiness of a Carmen, the chest tones of a Dalila, Amneris, or Marfa, and the overall countenance and youthfulness of a Santuzza or Ziglinda. There has been no shortage of mezzo-sopranos who have specialized in this part, and most, if not all of them, went out of the way to also sing Carmen, Dalila, Amneris, Azucena, Eboli, and many other great roles for a dramatic mezzo-soprano. And Clementine Margen did an absolutely wonderful job in this particular part. She was able to sound so sultry and so steely in a lot of the passages, even though there were some passages where she could have used a lot more chest. And going to her costume, I did not really care for her being in a blonde wig, as it didn't really look that flattering on her. I still have to give credit where credit is due, though, in terms of her red dress, as she looked lovely. But going back to her singing, I still have to say that Clementine Margen still maintains that focused and absolutely lovely tone, and I'm pretty sure that with time and further development, the chest tones will become a lot more fully realized. We also had such equally fine singing from Alexandra Hutton's lyrical Pedro, Cornelia Kim's sparky Garcias, James Krishak's youthful Rodriguez, and Samuel Dale Johnson's tall, striking, and elegant Juan. So overall, the singing was quite decent. Neither exceptional nor horrible from the main cast, but in terms of the supporting cast, there were some standouts, especially where Samuel Dale Johnson was concerned. Sure, with a much stronger performance from the lead singers, it would have been absolutely amazing. But as they performed, they were alright for the most part. And I still hope that the likes of Alex Esposito, Seth Carrico, and Clementine Margen continue to develop their technique in the right way so that they can bloom a lot more as singing actors. However, I still also have to give credit to the acrobatists and the figurants for doing equally fine jobs in making the overall experience wonderful to witness. And the conducting done by Emmanuel Villaume was vibrant and absolutely breathtaking. He knew how to find certain passages in the score which he can muscle through, and even find some passages where he can let everything flow in such a gentle way, and he managed to do so with such aplomb. And the chorus and orchestra of the Deutsche Oper Berlin were, as always, fabulous all the way through. So overall, with a production that I have very iffy feelings with, if not for the overall frigidness of this said production, some decent performances from the main cast, and absolutely stand-up performances from the supporting cast, and very fine conducting done by Maestro Emmanuel Villaume, as well as equally great performances from the chorus, the figurants, the acrobatists, and the orchestra. This was an evening that was well spent, and I'm pretty sure that those of you who have watched this particular production of Don Quixote would also feel the same way. Speaking of which, those of you who have watched this particular production of Massenet's Don Quixote at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, what'd you think of it? Did you feel like Alex Esposito and Seth Carrico did such fine jobs as Don Quixote and Sancho Panza? Did you feel like Clementine Margen stole the show as Dulcinea? Do you feel like the supporting players in the forms of Alexandra Hutton, Cornelia Kim, James Krishik, and Samuel Dale Johnson did equally fine jobs, if not better than the main cast? Or do you feel like there was someone who did not really perform up to par with any of the players? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for my review of Verdi's Otello, starring Russell Thomas in the title role, also at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. So until then, good night everybody, and have a great summer.